Welcome to eDiscovery Leaders Live, where I get a chance to chat with luminaries in eDiscovery and related areas. This broadcast is sponsored by Reveal Brainspace, the industry's leading AI eDiscovery platform. Don't forget to subscribe to watch me, George Socha, weekly with leaders in eDiscovery. Thank you for tuning in. Discovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. I am George Socha, heading up brand awareness at Reveal. This week, we are broadcasting from Legalweek 2024 in New York City. On each episode of eDiscovery Leaders Live, I get the chance to host a chat with luminaries in eDiscovery and related areas. Past episodes are available on the Reveal website. Go to revealdata.com, select resources, then select eDiscovery Leaders Live. Our guest for this episode is Kayann Fitzgerald. Kayann is Director of eDiscovery and Practice Technologies at Davis, Wright, and Tremaine. Kayann, welcome.
Thank you, George. Thank you for having me here. It's exciting to be part of the Reveal platform at Legalweek.
Well, thank you. So today, for this episode, I think we're talking people, right? Not technology.
Right.
A deviation from the theme, perhaps.
Absolutely.
So what is it you want to cover about people?
So I think it's really important for all of us to remember that we can create all of these amazing technology advancements, but people actually have to be able to use them. And I think that is a missing component in a lot of the things that we hear about. And that's where my role is really helping people adopt that technology and use it in their everyday lives for success.
So tell us a little bit more then about your role.
Sure. So I'm the Director of eDiscovery and Practice Technologies. We obviously have our own in-house platforms, but we also do a number of other, fun and exciting things like social media collections, data transfers, and then obviously the full eDiscovery experience. I started in this industry a long time ago. In the early 90s, I was working in what we called databases, but it was very much non-eDiscovery or ESI.
At that point, it was really working with paper rather than electronic information, right?
Absolutely. And it was the garbage in, garbage out era, because it was whatever somebody was surmising from that review of that paper and ingesting into an Access database or summation. And I was working in a lot of summation databases and eventually concordance and so on and so forth. And then with the fact that we all survived the Y2K, there was these two guys, Tom and I think his name was George, maybe came up with something called the EDRM.
Just maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah.
And so I was tasked with the firm that I was with at that particular time to come up with our plan forward on how we were going to roll that out and adopt it, meaning the 2006 Federal Rules of Civil Procedure and the changes. And the fun fact behind that is, and I still have it today, it was about a 3 or 4 inch binder that everybody got when we did this rollout, even though it was all about ESI. And I do go back and I look at it just for levity purposes. And then as my career continued, I was a paralegal. I started off as a paralegal and I managed any number of multi-district litigation, class actions, several large matters. And so from that, managing a number of cases, it just kind of became, I moved up the ranks, so to speak, as far as managing people and teams, and really kind of doubling down on making sure that people felt like they could have success working with technology.
We've got now a new generation of people. We've got a post sort of COVID world with very different expectations about what the workplace is like. We've got different challenges on the eDiscovery front, and even though this isn't about technology, different technologies, both that the data comes from and that we use with the technology. How have those changes changed what you do?
Really great question. For me, it's about relationships. It's building that trust. It's really setting people up for success. That is my key my key takeaway every day I go to work. I want to make sure that any person, and that can be lawyers, it can be support staff, it can be some of the technologists that we have that are on my team, which I have a fantastic team. Setting them up so that they can feel empowered to be able to do the best work that they can, that they're capable of doing, and that we can provide the best work product ultimately for our clients.
It is one thing to say you're going to set people up for success.
Yep.
It's another thing to achieve that. How does one actually get to the achievement stage?
So that is probably my greatest accomplishment in my career. Is I look at the attorneys in particular that I may have started working with them when they were summer clerks or junior associates, and then even up to the partner ranks. And I measure my success by the success that they're achieving, whether it's that partnership and that book of business, or if it's going out and becoming that in-house counsel. I'm proud to say that there's a sitting USDC Western Washington judge that I brought up through the ranks as an associate. So it's really exciting to see those individuals achieve that success and knowing that you're part of it. But I always keep my door open too, even for people who are not necessarily with, the wonderful law firm I'm with now, but they'll lean in and say, "Hey, Kayann, I have a question. Can I call you? Can we meet for coffee?" I love that, and I take that very seriously.
For someone at another law firm, for example, with a role similar to yours, who's looking for some guidance, what suggestions would you offer?
It's a very good question. I think it's really important about creating those relationships with individuals that will also champion you. And obviously having that soft skill set. I don't ever underestimate that, because I know it's not something you can necessarily teach, but I do think that it's something you can emulate and provide that mentorship. And I try really hard with that with my team. And that's not just like in person like we are today, but obviously written communications. I hate to use the word email, but I'll say email because it's very law firm-esque, and that's been my entire career. But obviously too with the chat applications, making sure that you're mindful about, how you're relaying information, period. Yeah.
When you need to communicate via written electronic communications, whether it's email, chat, Slack, whatever it might be, that can be a unforgiving medium, lacking in nuance. It can be hard to get messages across appropriately and effectively. Are there any things people can do to make that work better?
I like to try to make sure that I keep it at the human level. I know that that's very much like people want to throw stuff into, ChatGPT. Hey, will you reword this? Make it sound more businesslike, or make it sound like it was written by a lawyer. That's not me. I want to be able to be very frank. I want to interpret the information that could be somewhat challenging from somebody trying to break down technology or the process, and present it in a way that is digestible. So one of the examples that I'll use that I'll have an associate reach out saying, "Hey, I've got to get this spun up. Let's do this right away." And I'll respond by saying, "Great. Have you ever traveled abroad?" And they'll literally look at me and they'll go, "What are you talking about?" And I'll say, "Have you traveled abroad?" And they will say, "Well, yeah, usually." I mean, if they don't, then I'll say, "All right, well, then let's use Disneyland or something like that as an example." And I take them through the process of e-discovery is very similar to planning a trip. You have to plan. Otherwise, you're not going to know where you're going to eat. You're not going to know where you're going to, what sites you're going to go see or how you're going to get from point A to point B. It's the same thing with e-discovery. If you don't set it up and you have a plan and an idea, it may not be a perfect idea at the end of your game, you're going to have some pitfalls along the way. You may not be very excited about that trip. So, yeah.
Well, people do have pitfalls along the way. Pitfalls can be challenging. Folks on your team will have run into difficulties. How do you help them navigate through those troubled waters?
So I think honesty is the best practice. Technology is not perfect. There's going to be pitfalls with that. It's human to be, to err, basically. And so being very forthcoming, being transparent about the fact that there was a problem and how we're going to fix it, and coming with solutions. Being a problem solver from the front end is absolutely critical. And again, I look at that if I'm using an outside, service provider on a matter, or if I'm looking internally at my own team. It's like, how can we improve this process? How can we make sure that this doesn't happen again? Um, I've also seen it from the chair in the courtroom when you have a witness who gets eviscerated on the witness stand because they're lying through their teeth because the metadata is saying something totally different. And so I think that there's also some ways to really approach it in making sure that your witness really understands the bench is going to take what they're seeing in the data and not necessarily the words that you're saying when they don't match up.
Right, and that's a challenge witnesses didn't have to face in the past.
Right, absolutely, definitely.
As again, the data changes, the technology changes, it can be overwhelming to try to keep up with all these new and different things. And that must be a challenge for folks on your staff as well. How can you help them with that set of issues?
Thank you, George. So I'm a realist, and I love that question because that is exactly what we have to deal with today. It is absolutely top of mind. Yes, I'm all about Gen AI. I'm keeping my eye on AI. I got my AI guy out there. I'll be leaning in on him hard, when it comes time to really focus in and adopt that. But right now, it's those data sources, and the varieties are just wide open. And I think it's an industry problem, quite frankly, being able to collect it, to be able to, export it, ingest it, review it, and eventually produce it, if I might use the EDRM model.
But of course, of course.
So, and I know that there's, some work to be done on, hey, we've got all of these different data sources. And I always worry about the 13-year-old and what they're creating in the garage and when that's going to come to play.
And they are,
Yeah.
and it will.
Yep. Absolutely. Definitely.
As you are, of course, not the only one in a position like this in a law firm. There are those with years of experience, but those who are just starting out. For those who are perhaps overwhelmed by what they're facing, what should they keep in mind?
I'm sorry, say the last.
What should they keep in mind?
You're not going to know everything out of the box, and you're going to have to learn how to pivot and understand that what might have worked on one matter is not necessarily going to work on another. And that's okay. It's about problem solving. It's about being very collaborative with your team. I have the most amazing team. They are very highly skilled, very well, long tenured individuals on my team. And I don't want anybody cherry picking my team now, but when I say that, but I cannot say that enough. They inspire me every day in how they approach problems and they approach workflows. And I think it's really important that you have those solid processes in place so that if you do have a newer person that's entering the team, that they can pick up on that, and they also know that they can lean in on their, fellow colleagues. And humor. I'm a big humor person, and it's okay. We're all going to make little mistakes along the way. How are you going to fix that? How are we going to, get the train back on the tracks and right the wrongs?
And when the mistake is more than just a little mistake along the way, the train isn't just off the tracks but upside down, then what happens?
So, then it's a harder conversation to have for sure, but it also goes into that postmortem of how did this happen? How can we make sure it's never going to happen again? Because that is the word that I'm going to focus on, the never. When you get to when you make a mistake that big, there's a bigger problem. And so that has to get fixed. And I don't believe that, it takes a team, it takes a village, so to speak. And we want to make sure that, and that's one reason why we do set up our workflows in the way that we have them set up and those procedures, just to make sure that that train doesn't tip over and fall off the tracks. So, and it's interesting. I think about that from, younger associates, younger attorneys, or for that matter, other professionals, legal professionals. They don't always understand the back end side of it, right? They don't also understand why you have to do certain things the certain way. I mean, if you screw up a time zone, that's a problem. That could really be a problem. So yeah, I really do look at a way of making sure that our workflows and procedures are, very, very closely knit and followed.
There we go. Well,
Yeah.
Kayann, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you,
Yeah.
George. It was a real pleasure. Appreciate it.
So,
All right.
Kayann,
Happy Legal Week.
You too. Kayann
right.
Fitzgerald is, as I said before, Director of E-Discovery and Practice Technologies at Davis, Wright, and Tremaine. I am George Socha. This has been E-Discovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. Thank you. And
Thanks,
Kayann,
George.
thank you.